I'll record. Yeah, just in case. Yeah, so yeah, nice to have you here. I've hung out at Calumet a couple times. I like their area, but anyways, um, yeah, nice to have you here. I guess first of all, I want to ask, why do you want to do this Q&A with us? What was your
Yeah,
motivation?
so I guess the reason why I got into software engineering in the first place was because of a mentor of mine. He actually went to Seneca College for, I think it's a systems administration, sort of like very Linuxy sort of program that he did. A good friend of mine. Um, we're pals at university, and he just came over one day and like showed me the ropes. And it was a very sort of impromptu way of teaching somebody. I guess he was very excited about the field. And he brought a laptop over, and we booted up some Linux machine. We installed MariaDB. We installed, I think it was Python with a DB adapter, and we hacked away at creating a database. And like it was probably my third or fourth real exposure to software at that point. But it was something real that I built. It was like building a
Oh,
schema and building this front end and back end. And I just took off from there. I was just completely obsessed over it. And
nice.
so that mentor of mine is like, I I value him a lot. And I just recently read, maybe not too long ago, that being a mentor to somebody, having a mentee or having a mentor is the most important experience that you can have in your entire career. And so that's what I've done over the last couple of like 4 years or so. I've mentored people. I've brought York U psychology grads that have very
Oh,
little experience on computers. Maybe they're gamers,
oh,
and I'll bring them up, and now they're employed at,
nice.
they have awesome gigs at Questrade. They're SREs at Questrade, or currently mentoring one other person right now, and I'm sort of monitoring where he's going. And I think it's a good thing to give back to the community, because that's
Nice.
why I'm here. That's what allowed me to be here.
Oh, okay. Nice. That's really cool to hear. Yeah,
So do you want to explain to us what Google is, like, as a general
yeah,
question?
I've never heard of Google, right?
Yeah.
Is it
Yeah,
like
so what's
as
oh,
like the interview question? What is a Google, or what's the company like?
I mean,
Yeah,
yes,
what's the
we never
company
really
like?
introduced you about we never really introduced like what your position is right now, or like what you've been up to.
Yeah, so right now I am part of what was before known as Google PSL. It's now it just rebranded this last month to Google Consulting. Essentially, Google has had a very lucrative ad revenue business for since its inception, essentially, and it's now moved into, as you guys already know, Google Cloud as a competitor to Azure, Oracle, and AWS. And they need more people to use the services to use the awesome things that is like Google Kubernetes engine. And so they're trying to constantly onboard new clients, and that's where we come in. So I have had tons and tons of cloud expertise over the years, and I've worked with Google partners, mostly North America, West Coast and East Coast. I've had very top clients like Twitter and Reddit were the biggest ones that I've had. We're talking about anywhere from $5 to $40 million in monthly or annual budget for cloud spend, which is huge. We're talking about thousands and thousands of machines. So I'm mostly a consultant on that front. That job is mainly SRE. It's a lot of writing software. So a lot of what I do is mainly software on Kubernetes, how to build custom controllers, sometimes operators. Yeah, so that's basically the bread and butter of what I do. Yeah. So right now I can't tell you which client I'm on because I won't start till
Oh yeah.
next week, but it's one of the big ones. It's a very big one, and I'm very, very excited to see how I can transform what they currently have in their on-premise hardware to bring them to the cloud. Because
Okay.
that's
I
the
mean,
beauty of it. You lose just one more thing. It's a lot more expensive to go on the cloud sometimes, but it's a lot easier to work around because the APIs are better designed in comparison to whatever somebody might have running on their farm, for example.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I would assume that you would also be like under an NDA or something as well. But I mean, yeah, if you haven't started your contract yet, then yeah, that makes sense too.
No, I still can't wrap my head around the fact that you mentioned your degree was in chemistry. Oh, anyways,
yeah,
yeah.
you can continue.
Like, I'm just curious, when did you decide to pursue, like, I know you mentioned your mentor was the reason why, like, you changed, like, did you like switch majors, or did you like graduate with a chemistry degree and then directly landed a software engineering job? Is that what you did?
Yeah. So the year was 2014. I had just finished my bachelor's in chemistry. I looked at several, places to work at around Toronto. I got offers as I remember doing my interviews that summer, and I didn't have a car. I took the bus all the way to Brampton. I forgot which line it is that took me to Brampton. I walked for about 20 minutes from the bus stop to the place, and it was a pretty good gig. It was like $80,000 for a chemical sales job. And I realized, what am I about to do? I'm going to go all the way into the suburbs. I have to get a car, find a rental, and I'm likely going to be detached from everything else. And I thought about it, and she said, well, when are you ready to sign for the contract? And I smiled and I told her I think about it. And I remember turning around and going home, and I spent some time thinking for what is the best thing that I should do. And AI and machine learning were the hot things at the moment. And I remember Udacity was this like very popular MOC, the platform that had just come out, and I saw this
Oh, it
whole
still is.
data analysis. Yeah, data analysis, 9-degree was the first thing that I did. And I think that was March. And by July, this company called Quandl, which was essentially supposed to be originally the Wikipedia of financial data, where they sort of scraped data all around the globe and put it into this NoSQL object storage, and then gave it to people at a cost. I remember they sent out they had a job posting. I studied my ass off for like 2 weeks, every single thing, like, simple things like how do you deserialize and serialize JSON? How do you make requests, post, get with Python? And I remember studying so much that I went in and they gave me this technical, and the technical was go scrape out these 4 API endpoints, join them together and create a CSV. And I was having a lot of trouble because I kept rewriting the variable within the for loop instead of just setting it outside. And the manager comes in, and as he's about to like look over my shoulder, I moved the variable one line up and I ran it, and boom, like the thing, and I got the result. And he's like, wow, you actually got it. And so I got the job. And he's like, I had like 50 Waterloo applicants apply, like nobody could do this technical, and we gave you the job because of exactly that. And so I got extremely lucky with the timing, with having learned all those skills on the online course. And that's how I got my first gig. That's essentially what happened. And
So you like
yeah,
didn't like what like the chemical job had to offer, so you just did your research and went straight into the tech industry. Like it was
yeah, essentially I realized that I could pick up a job in the suburbs, or I could go to Alberta because Fort McMurray was the popular thing back when. I don't know if you guys are familiar with what that is, but that was a very lucrative position. You were earning above $180,000 per year if you were to work there, but it changes your life completely. You're out in the boonies, it's really cold, you work late hours, and I realized that I didn't want to do that. So I took this path.
Did you have like anything I know a lot of these questions are very career related to you. I want to ask, did you have anything on your resume like that landed you that first position? Like, I guess I think that'd be
Yeah,
very surprising for some people.
yeah, I had a very little. So I had a group of friends in university. So essentially, one of my the people who one of my mentees, um, he um, he was a psychology major and he had this thesis that he had to propose, and um, he had this great idea, which I'll go over really quickly. It's a little bit complicated, but it's essentially um, it was a brain computer interface that he was trying to develop to help blind people, sorry, not blind people, but people in wheelchairs, like mostly paraplegics who don't have access to their limbs, to move around. And there's this really cool effect that basically when you look at different lights that are blinking at different frequencies, they actually project specific waveforms on the occipital nerves right here at the end of the on the back of your head.
Okay.
And I that was my first experience to writing software with them. That was essentially like a lot of C sharp. But that was a very small project that I got to tag along alongside. Essentially, that was as much programming, as much as real world programming that I had done, other than the courses that I had done online before getting my first job.
Wow. So I mean, I would assume like you were saying you're competing against, I guess, Waterloo people that had studied comp sci and all that. So the stars aligned, I guess, for you to get like even like the interviewing and I guess pass it, but you also did the online course, but yeah, I guess a lot
Yeah,
of things.
I think there's something to be said about over preparing. Like you know, I've done my fair share of lead code. I know how it feels like totally grinding, but there is something to it. You know, there's something to it for sure. Like you can definitely get the job if you really put in the hours. That's what I've seen with most of the people that join these companies, is they did their fair share of practice problems before.
Do you still
Nice.
do lead code?
I still do lead code
Cool.
as much as hate to admit it, because it's very rare that you get to use this in you know, I think maybe you'll use DFS. I think you'll definitely use graphs a few times in your lifetime. If you're doing backend programming, front end, maybe you'll get to do it. Search, maybe. I don't know. It's a very niche problem. I still do it because companies sort of require it. I think you get to a level of seniority at some places where people either you come in by word of mouth, and so they'll tend to exclude it because it's almost like a gauntlet for them. It's almost like a test of like, well, how really they're almost testing for how well prepared you are. I don't think
Yeah.
people really care if you know when to use a red black tree or a try. I think people want to know, well, how much do you want the job? That's what people really care about. I think I've used graphs once in my entire life, and that was because I was optimizing vehicle routes for a Canadian company for minimizing fuel usage. So it doesn't come up often. It doesn't come up very often at all. So yeah, I do it when I'm trying to interview. I'll start with easies and then move to medium hard.
That's pretty interesting here. Yeah, I would normally imagine like you were saying, as you get more senior, you sort of don't do as much lead code. Is what I've sort of heard, but and it's nice to hear like your perspective on like the few times you have had to use it in real life and like when you mostly you haven't, but yeah, it just is like that sometimes. I like companies just need to filter out people quickly when they're hiring a lot, I
I
guess.
Yeah, I think for a lot of the work that we do, like, you know, you're conscientious of the space that you're using. You're conscientious of not accidentally running in, you know, polynomial time if there's no need to. that's when things really come, especially when you're like when it's client facing. That's when things are really come into play.
I see. I guess we had another question of what do you like most about software engineering? Like you sort of mentioned a little bit about like your past experiences with certain areas like vehicle routing. Sort of what do you like about software engineering? You know,
I think
like,
seeing the technologies evolve and seeing them getting simpler and simpler. So I think maybe it's important to just backtrack a bit. So a lot of the work that I do is SRE. There's a moderate component of SWE of software development that I do, but the majority of it is, you know, maintaining and monitoring and designing systems that, you know, will really like stand the test of time. And by that I mean like maybe a month of uptime on the node or the container. That's sort of like what we're looking for. You know, we treat things as cattle and not pets. That's a sort of like a new adage that Suri people like to say. And so what over time we like in my relatively short experience, I've seen older systems like things like Chef, Ansible, Terraform, all of these systems for reliability engineers, they're sort of getting phased out. Terraform is still there. I would say that Chef and Ansible are still there in the sense that Java is still there, but it's losing its rank amongst the top performer or amongst the top most popular languages or frameworks to be used. And you're seeing sort of like this, everything is like falling, like it's chasing the minima, right, of a function. Everything is going for the simplest and best technology. And so we saw that with the Linux kernel, or like over a couple of decades ago, and now you're seeing this gravitation towards Kubernetes. Everybody wants Kubernetes. Everybody wants containers. And if you're on a VM, you want containers. And once you have containers, you need an orchestrator, and you need Kubernetes, and everybody wants it, and it's in extremely high demand. And it's likely going to be like the one technology that's going to be around for, I would say, like at least a decade until another heavy hitter comes out and takes it out. And it's really interesting to see. My favorite part about being in this field is how the technologies are battling against each other, and how a new idea like we should use containers instead of virtual machines, that just takes over completely and just like becomes the majority over like the course of like 5 or 10 years. And when I say Terraform is a really popular technology with reliability engineers and with infrastructure people, but it's on its way out because it has its flaws. It at the moment and solved amazing things, which is I want to declare my infrastructure declaratively. And I want to write it once.
I did see a presentation too about Terraform like last week, and there was an Amazon tech conference in Toronto, and they were talking about terraforming. Like they showed the possibilities of, like all the cloud infrastructure and how big Kubernetes are, and every single company there, we're all like using Kubernetes and have solutions for Kubernetes over there. Like I was mind blown. Like I didn't even know what it was and how important it is until that, like when me and Jordan, when we visited there, like the Amazon Tech Conference.
Yeah, I would say that Netflix, for example, has a large footprint on non-container EC2, but their plan is to move everything to Kubernetes. And Twitter tried this. They had, there was this alternative to Kubernetes called Mesos, which I think ran 95% of their workloads, but they were trying to switch very eagerly to Kubernetes because it's I hate to say, but it's a better technology. It's just much better, well designed. It's much more intuitive, and it has
easier to use.
It's easier to use, and you have total like very fine-grained control over like how you want containers to interact with each other, where they get placed. It's very powerful.
I guess one thing that sort of that Faya sort of prompted me to think about was I think a lot of students, especially like more junior people, don't get exposed to more infrastructure things. Especially considering like you would only get exposed to that if you work like at a company that needs to have stuff at scale. How did you sort of get into the more DevOps infrastructure side? Or I'm sure a lot of people might not be too experienced with that sort of stuff.
Yeah, so I think the way people go into it is either the company has a serious need for it and they'll take an intern or a junior SWE and then they'll put them in the infrastructure side of things. That's a very common way of getting into it. That's how I got into it. My story is sort of like very sort of unfortunate, but at the same time, I'm very happy to know where I ended up.
For sure.
So yeah, I mean, my original plan was to be a data scientist. I studied my ass off, like NLP, like natural language processing, deep learning, AI, machine learning, like all of these, like data processing, data wrangling. I spent hours upon hours, almost every single weekend, doing projects at home and like creating machine learning classifiers for like random things so that I could get some experience. And I landed the job that I wanted, which was I was essentially like a AI developer for a very it's actually a company that's still running up in North York, around North York, called Wisdom.ai. They do sort of like all the chatbots for like Rogers, Fido, etc. I landed there and it was an amazing opportunity. And I got there as under the field of artificial intelligence, ML. But there was a real need I was building so many tools and classifiers and dashboards for the classifiers that they didn't have the bandwidth for them to deploy all of these things. So they said, hey, we'll take some time. We have Chef, we have Terraform, we have Docker Swarm. We need you to like figure out how to like build, like containerize all of these apps together and then deploy them onto our infrastructure. That's how I first got in. It was because of a real need within one of my second job, actually, where I had to learn all of these tools. And I had to learn really quickly. There was no expectation. It was just like, get it done and let me know when you're finished. And yeah, it was quite the experience. It's a complete paradigm shift from writing software. Like you're working with declarative languages. It's very different. Yeah. You don't typically write tests. It's very different from the way that from the SWE path.
Oh, I see. That's pretty interesting. I feel like a lot of people, that's like a completely new thing that some people might not have thought about. I personally have been exposed a little bit. I am leading a little bit more backend like infrastructure tools, but I think a lot of people, especially we might have like people like in their first year of university or something that might be here, they might not have even heard about a lot of these technologies. But yeah, if you say like you can learn quickly on the job, I think that's pretty encouraging to a lot of people.
Does Google have like courses where engineers can learn about Kubernetes and all the cloud-based stuff?
Yeah, they're mostly free, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah. If you go just on YouTube, they have a huge presence. I think a lot of the Google Cloud has like their own YouTube channels, and you can just go in and they'll teach you how Kubernetes works at a very fundamental level. Yeah.
So is that how like you learned on the spot, like through YouTube videos and Google, or did you have like a mentor at Google sort of teach you all this?
No, I picked up Kubernetes because I had used Docker Swarm. So Docker Swarm was the predecessor to essentially container orchestration. I would say the predecessor to most container orchestration. Once you learn Docker Swarm and the CLI, you sort of know what the CLI is, like the API to work with Kubernetes. The scheduler is not the same. There's obviously different components, but you're essentially just orchestrating containers, and you're making sure to place them where they need to be given restrictions and volume. And so it was very familiar to me to jump from. I remember when I first picked up the CLI for Kubernetes, and it's like, okay, well, I want to suck into the container. Okay, well, that's the same. Oh, I want to check out the logs. Okay, well, that's the same argument essentially. So it was, I had already picked it up from Docker Swarm. So I mean, going back to what I said about seeing the technology sort of mutate and change and land onto like the into one, so in this case Kubernetes, that's it's really cool because you're part of that system. You're writing tools and you're working alongside it. It's really cool. So yeah, no, I didn't have a mentor. It was a lot of hacking late at night. I remember taking my projects home from work, and I would work sometimes like pretty late into the evening, like
So you
sometimes
like
10,
tinkered
11
your
p.m.
way into building up that knowledge through your projects.
Yeah, exactly.
That's how like a lot of people learn too. Like they either tinker and then they learn a bit themselves out of curiosity, and then they pick some skills up. So like, do you in your work with a lot of solution architects and people like that, or DevOps engineers?
Yeah. So it's a very broad term, solution architect. That I've seen solution architects typically be in non-consultant engagements. So typically, like you're building out a product, right? That's where I've seen like solution architects work alongside. Let's say you have a SaaS, like a software as a service that you own, and you want to deploy it on like a tenant's infrastructure, like IBM wants to run the software, but they don't want to run it on the cloud. They want to run it on their service. You'll sort of bring a solutions architect. I've worked with them in the past. Luckily for us, a lot of the stuff that we get to do is mainly greenfield, and it's very flexible with how we work. So with cloud engagements, when a client wants to move onto the cloud, they sort of trust you to be the expert. And our job is essentially to provide the best in class solution to a problem. And that typically means like, you're either hybrid hybrid cloud on premise or fully on the cloud. It's typically one of those two. So we sort of act like solution architects at the same time. Many of us were writing the software, we're designing the infrastructure, we're architecting the solution at the end of the day.
Is there like another name for it then, if not solutions architect?
Yeah, I think cloud consultant is probably the most general term. That's what, if you go to PSO and you ask for, you use the word cloud consultant, they know exactly what you're talking about, for sure.
Wow, I mean,
yeah.
Oh, sorry, Jordan, go ahead.
Oh no, you
it's
can.
pretty amazing how advanced, but also I didn't know how easy it was to also pick up cloud technologies too, because I thought like when people were talking about it, they were talking all these mumbo jumbo and it didn't process through my brain. But when I actually started learning about it, I'm like, okay, it makes sense now what they're trying to say, because I like it also, like when you see all those stuff happen, like when you work with Docker and containerize your apps and then slowly work with Kubernetes, I think it's a really big, like you'll be amazed like if once you do all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think grokking cloud is a lot easier than grokking the entirety of the JavaScript universe, like Node, TypeScript, React. There's just it's very complicated because it's so widely used. But cloud is I would say it's very fine-tuned. There's only a couple of options because only a couple of options make sense. And that probably is because infrastructure people like to test downtime. So they spend a lot of time thinking of really clever and good solutions ahead of time. And so I think cloud is relatively easy. For example, like grokking lead code hard. So that's difficult. That takes a lot of time. That takes quite a bit of time. But cloud can be simple if you know how to approach it. But cloud can be very complicated if it's, if you fall into some traps.
I was actually wondering, I was thinking about now, did you ever explore like other areas like you mentioned like JavaScript? Did you try and explore like front end at some point? Like, yeah, how was that? Or like if you did that?
Yeah, I
Like
tried a
other
couple of
areas?
things.
Mhm.
Yeah, I did front end. I did data engineering for quite some time.
Mm.
Um, I did back end. So we're like writing
Oh,
servers.
mm,
Honestly, I found I didn't find it easy to write good like excellent CSS. I found it easy to make like an average looking website, but to like really fine tune a website to make it look as good as I would want something to be, I found that it takes quite a bit of time. I tried data engineering as well, and data engineering, it's got pretty cool concepts. Like you're essentially into distributed systems territory. Like you have to think about like how data is processed across like hundreds of or thousands of VMs, and what happens if one crashes, where do the files go, or the memory or the state goes. And these problems take anywhere between 10 minutes to an hour for you to get a result. And I found that I didn't have that quick loop of erroring or making mistakes or getting the answer. It takes a long time for me to get an answer out of a data engineering job. So it could take for me to find out that the syntax error is actually 100 lines down in the script, and it takes 3 hours for that to get back to me. It's a very painful experience. So I found that I wasn't really too happy with that field. And infrastructure was like the right amount of easiness, essentially. Because right now with Kubernetes, if the app is not working, you can just restart the container. If the app isn't working, you can check the logs, you can exec into the container. It makes it very easy to fiddle with the system, as opposed to like, set up your auto reloader with your JavaScript framework, change the file, hope it's actually reloading, but you have to burst the cache. Otherwise, you're seeing the old version of the page. And this is these things take time to learn, but with infrastructure, it's very simple because you're at the lowest possible layer. You're working with containers mainly.
Okay.
So it's very easy to level up in cloud, I would say, if you have the right guidance. If you know what skills to seek out, then you can be very competent. And I think it's easier to get to seniority with infrastructure than it is for software development.
So that's like your sweet spot, cloud infrastructure. Like that's where you're at.
Yeah, I mean, as opposed to on-premise infrastructure. With cloud, the servers are likely always available because Google has a business to run, and it's in their best interest to have servers available for you. With a like a farm, you have a limited number of them, and anything can happen anytime. You can have fires, you can have floodings, you can have network outages, electricity outages. That happens all the time, and Google sort of abstracts that away from you, right? And so it's super easy to get into cloud because it's most of the difficult problems are taken, they're stripped back.
All right. I think, yeah, we have questions coming in. I think we should
Yeah, I think
move
everyone's
over
just
to like the
dying
questions
to
that
like get
people
their
submitted.
answers.
Yeah. I guess we want to start with the questions people previously submitted in our Google Forms.
Let's start with the first one. It's basically about like getting a job at Google. First one is, what is more important, grades or projects, in your opinion?
To land co-op jobs or jobs in general.
Like in
I think
today's market, what is it like?
So I've interviewed a lot of candidates, and I've interviewed people who've written the technologies that I work for, that I use. And they can come off, they can be great people, or they can be extremely arrogant. And I can guarantee you that the deciding factor for the primary component for deciding whether one is a good hire is the culture fit. Spotify is known for being super picky about culture fit. They want, like, it's a very laid back, but like I also want to get stuff done attitude. At Google, they look for googliness, and I'll let you Google that term, what it means. I think nobody wants a know-it-all. I think everybody wants to work with somebody who is easy to get along with, who they're comfortable to work alongside with, because I don't think that there's anything worse than having one, silos in a team. That's one thing that managers try to look out for. So honestly, I would say that soft skills is the most important thing. Grades are important, but it really isn't that important. It really isn't that important. I would say that projects are far more important, and it's really not what you did, but what you got out of it.
So project is a group
I
or
agree.
individual projects? Like, how do you know if someone's a good fit in culture? Because you're only interviewing them for like a few minutes, right? How do you like?
Yeah, I think interviews are a sham. Honestly, I think it's a problem that nobody's really cracked. Look up what Elon Musk has to say about interviewing. If you're wondering about personal input versus like what other people in the team did, look out for Elon Musk has very few good words. Good interviewers will ask you at to the bone, what is to the most crucial details of the project, and they'll see if the candidate is able to just regurgitate them out because they actually lived that experience and it was impressionable because it was likely something emotional. You worked late at night, or it was a contentious project, but you learned something from it and you're able to talk about it. And so if you're able to talk about your experiences on the technical level, I think you're a solid candidate in my book.
All right, I kind of liked everything you said there. Like I really like that answer. That's all I'm gonna say. But I guess we'll go on to the next question from Michael. How do you deal with stagnation of progress and motivation in terms of practicing for technical interviews?
That's yeah, that's a rough one. I think that's rough. I think you have to know what you want out of this. I think for a lot of people it's money, for some people it's recognition, and sort of like focus in on that. But like at the same time, take it easy, because life is good and you shouldn't spend all your time doing lead code mediums. Like life is also too short for that. Give it a shot. Spend some time and ask yourself what you really want out of life. Like, I know what I wanted out of life, and I really focused in on it, and I got there. And so you have to sort of develop an appreciation for like what it took all of these other people that did this to be there. And if you give yourself a little bit more time and space out your interviewing, I mean, unless you're seriously in a rush, I think the entire process becomes a lot more manageable. It makes a lot more sense to learn over a 3-month period of time than to condense it, to cram before exams. We've all been there. So try to space it out and think about the end goal, because once you hit your end goal, you're going to be really happy. I promise you. Most of the people who've gotten into senior level, they're really happy with where they are. They have families now, or they have Teslas, like, whatever it is, right? I see that they're content.
Nice. Yeah, I agree with spacing it out. Even though sometimes, as students, you tend to cram at the end, but yeah, that's a good answer.
Yeah, it can also cause burnout too, like doing just lead code, right?
Yeah, I think spend some time getting into system design. I don't know. I don't think lead code has some questions like that, but it's a good change of pace because you're not just writing code anymore. Even though that might seem like the end all be all, I think once you get to seniority, you want some system. You need to understand system and good system design, distributed systems, for example. Find some books on that, and it'll broaden your spectrum of knowledge.
All right. Another question. This one is pretty interesting. I'd say. Is it better to pick a niche to study when studying for interviews and only applying to specific positions, or studying everything, and casting a larger net?
Yeah. So, I guess you all know that expression, jack of all trades, master of none. I think specifically in this job market, I think it pays off to be very niche. I think if you come into a job interview and you tell them your full stack, but you know a little, back end sort of well, but you have to still fight your way through front end, that's going to show. And so we call these unicorns. It's very difficult to find like 100% level 100 full stack engineer. Like, it's very difficult to find those people. I think in this job market, it makes sense to really focus on something entirely niche. So for example, if you did distributed computing, let's say you really like the idea of writing jobs in Spark, then go spend some time and do that. And I think you'll find a gig as an intern or as a junior very quickly. If you tell me that you've had interest in containers because they're the future, I think they're the future. They're here and they're the future. And you really want to pick up on the path, and you show me that you know how to use the CLI, you've you've done Kubernetes the hard way. And by the way, that's a GitHub repo that if anybody's interested, you guys should look it up. It teaches you all of the moving pieces. And you showed me that, and you showed me super keen interest in this very niche thing. I would probably hire you because I see the hunger in you. Yeah, I've interviewed for only a little bit, but I can tell you that that's where my preferences would be. Yeah, that's right. The Kelsey Hightower one.
All right. Thank you. That's really informative, and I think yeah. I think we'll go over to the next question, but I think that's a really good answer.
Some of the questions are actually repeated, so I'm just gonna skip through them because we've already answered them. Like, you've already mentioned.
We have some leak code ones which you've mentioned.
Yeah,
but
and soft skills. So and some people want to know the real question: how would the process of interviewing be in Google? Like not, let's say, not for cloud, but like the common posts in Canada, like SWE intern and all that. If I got rejected during the intern interviews, can I reapply for the same position within 6 months?
You might not know this, but well, yeah, we can. What's your answer about it?
Yeah, well, I mean, I applied to be a SWE at Google, and I didn't get in. So that's where I am now, because the SWE interviews are actually the hardest at Google. I think Google has the lowest acceptance rate. The time at which you can apply back is, I think it's anywhere between 6 months to a year. Your recruiter will let you know. That's typically, I think for you guys, it's not that bad. Most people get 3 tries to enter Google. I think after your 3rd fail, they don't consider your application anymore. So just take it easy with
That's if you've
how
done
often you apply to Google.
Yeah. That's if you've done an interview, right? Not applying, because I don't think we want to scare people away from applying.
Yeah, like I was like, wait, what the fuck? I've applied to Google so many.
But
yeah, no. So the SWE interview is really difficult. if you do enough lead code, eventually you will get in. I can promise you that. It's hard, but it's not that hard. Like really, like I think getting into Ivy League universities is harder than that, in my opinion. It's a much more balanced portfolio that you need to get into that. I think most people can do it. It's not that difficult, and sometimes you just get lucky.
Yeah, balanced portfolio meaning like in terms of like instead of like Google where you'd more like specialize in lead code and that's how you'd get in, is what you're saying, right? Yeah. Okay.
There's also some questions here in the chat, like a lot of people ask. One of them is, let me answer this one from Akeem. Regarding the data side of software engineering, I'm wondering, are there internships focused more on data engineering aspects such as ETLs, pipelines, etc.? Kind of want to play my side projects to focus more on data related aspects of software engineering rather than UI design, because I think this person doesn't like front end. I kind of feel like focusing on one field might reduce my chances of landing my first internship. His question is, how likely am I to land a data related internship as my first? And if it's a bit difficult, what do you recommend? He basically wants guidance.
I've had data interns before at the companies that I've worked at. It's a little bit more niche. Distributed systems, I'd say, is a little bit harder than writing, good or passable UIs. But seek out Shopify. Shopify is all about data. That's one Canadian company that it pays decently well. Start networking. Go to their, start going to meetups. Eventually, you find somebody who works at one of these places, and you might get a referral or something. I think to answer your question, is it less likely that you're going to get a job than to work? I think yes, like on average, but I think you should pursue what you want to do. I don't suggest anybody do a job that they don't want to do. I don't like to do front ends. I know people who love writing JavaScript to generate front ends. That's not my niche. Seek out what you want to do. And if it's data, if you're really interested into if you're really interested knowing and doing more distributed systems, then go ahead and do it. I suggest sort of like obsessing over and learning as much as you can. And then when you apply, it's going to show, because you're going to stand out amongst all of the other candidates. It's going to be very obvious who really wants the job and who will sort of like needs the job and isn't trying too hard.
So focusing on one aspect or one field is better than having your options open. Is that right?
Sometimes not. It depends on the job market. It goes back to how much do you need the job. If you need the job, then take whatever you can. I did that for some time until I got into the field that I wanted. But I would keep your focus on what you really want to do. Maybe you'll find out that you don't want to do data. That's exactly what happened to me. I was obsessed about, I would go to conferences, I would go to meetups. And then when I actually started working with it, instead of just reading about it and talking about it, I realized that it wasn't for me. But you only know that if you try.
Yeah, that's actually a great advice. Like I've heard that thing a lot of times. I actually believe it's really true. Like, you don't know unless you try. A really good answer.
Yeah.
Is there other? Oh, this is one question. It's actually a pretty good one. For what sort of projects would you like to see on a person's resume? Does it make sense to put a generic CRUD application, or would it be better to make something more niche and specialized?
Very similar.
Yeah, if you came with a generic CRUD application, like I think most people in their second or third year can write that. It's sort of like the lower bar, but if you show me that you did something really interesting at the at that level. Maybe you were aware of how to optimize the database in some cases, or you wrote really beautiful and elegant front end code to just, you use recursion to generate something on the front end. I would be impressed. If you wrote something that was niche, then you sort of have run into the trouble of not being able to convey how awesome it was. If you wrote if you solved the traveling salesman problem and you found like the global optimal solution, but you weren't able to communicate that to me, that means absolutely nothing to me, and you're probably not going to get a job there. So this is, I guess, it's something that I learned along the way. It's like, whatever you do, whenever you're chatting to people, whenever you write a document, always ask yourself, like, who is the audience? That's the most important thing you can ask, because I've written technical papers that sometimes go over people's heads and sometimes are too simple. I hate to say it, but there's this really sweet middle ground. And so you do some social engineering, find out what these people do, what their work entails, and see how you can connect what you know with what they do, because that's how you build rapport with people, right? I can talk to consultants all over the globe because we both endure the same hardships. But as a person who's not in the in-group, you need to find a way of figuring out what drives people and what makes their ears perk, right? It's different. It's very different to talk to a fully technical person than to talk to a product manager. It's very difficult. We use entirely different jargon, even though we sort of mean the same thing when we chat. So try to create a story when you're applying, and try to make it as fine-tuned to the company as possible.
Do you look at numbers? Like, if, let's say, in a project I say, oh, I optimized my SQL database by 20%, like, those numbers, do they matter to you, or do you just want to see if we can optimize it or not?
Yeah, so let's say that I was working at a company where optimization was really important, and let me tell you that there are companies in the in the top 500s that don't really care about optimization that much. Let's say you're working for Google and you need to build the fastest search engine in the world. If you came up with a story about how you optimized a certain query, or how you chose, you sharded your database in your project, right? As an intern, and you showed me that, and you showed me a cool way of doing that. Like, let's say you wrote your own hashing function. I would be very pleasantly surprised if you did that for me, and I would tell the hiring manager to likely hire you, because we see the people who really have that spark in their eye, and you have to search for it. You have to, and it's really hard because you're not in the in-group. Again, you have to figure out what the in-group likes, what they like to talk about. If it's optimized backends, then go and write exactly that, and you'll find yourself pleasantly surprised.
I like it a lot, like what you're saying about know who you want to, know the group you're trying to deal with, and know what they want and what you can do with them. I think that was a really good answer. Do we have more? I guess Jason asked, as you mentioned earlier, having that cloud infra team placement experience helped accelerate your learning and applications of cloud technologies. What's your take on junior engineers pursuing certificates or studying distributed systems theory if said opportunities are not currently, in quotes, available?
So I think it's like, if you have an AWS certified engineer and you apply, like, it's not like as a junior engineer, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to answer this in the fairest way possible. I think, let me tell you something that I've noticed. I've noticed that the best engineers don't have certs. I don't know why that is. And I'm sort of like, I sort of don't like the answer, because I know that there's a lot of value. But what I think happens is the best engineers sort of like hack away at it because they love it. There are some engineers who don't really love it, but are maybe they were a sysadmin. Maybe they were like handling Slack accounts and email accounts, and they sort of fell into DevOps, but they totally hate the field and they have to get certs. I've noticed that there are most of the people that I see that can find jobs have a lot of certs. And I don't know what their relationship is between that, but I noticed that sort of the best people that I work with don't chase certificates from AWS to get validated, because they don't need validation, because they've actually solved problems on their own. So if you spend enough time with a program, with a CLI, and you figure out its kinks and you understand what's causing the bug, you've learned something for your own. But the certs don't teach you those things. The certs teach you they teach you how to, create the framework for infrastructure, but they don't tell you how to like cut a corner with paint. That's something that you have to go figure out by yourself. Now, having said that, I think there are some technologies that are very difficult to get into. So I guess the best example that I can give you is Kubernetes. It's very difficult to get into working with Kubernetes because it's a container orchestrator. What the heck am I supposed to do with that? Well, you have to build your apps and then deploy, you have to create a Docker file, create your apps, create containers out of them, and then have them orchestrated by Kubernetes. And then you sort of figure that out. But that doesn't come easy to some people. So I think get certs or get education via some other medium for the things that are intractable, that you really can't, it's not easy for you to figure out on your own. For everything else, I'm sure you can figure it out by yourself. Read the docs. I think the documentation is the most important way of learning something. And if it's not that, then it's the man page of a program, or it's the help function of a program. Those are the best ways to learn about it, because that's what the author intended.
Yeah, I feel like no one really reads the documentation at all. They just sort of Google the problem and just ask on Stack Overflow before even touching it. Like that's something I learned it in my internship before. My boss taught me, if I don't know anything, he gave me 3 like documentations for Flutter, and he told me just search it up over here. That kind of made my job a lot easier instead of just going up to him and asking, hey, can you help me with this function? Like,
yeah, I think what I tell a lot of the people that I mentor is, if you're using a program, like you're using Docker or Kubernetes or Node, for example, like just look at the man page of Node and just start reading like what all the options do. And you're going to find that it's going to solve a ton of problems for you in the future, because you know that there's specific argument and you're not building, you're not sticking a square peg in a round hole, as we like to say. So spend some time getting to know the tools, and certs are good, but I think there are better ways of learning, to be honest.
I also wanted to ask, like, I get so many advertisements from Google too. Like when I watch YouTube, like I see these ads where people are from Google. They're like saying, oh, I did Google certificates and I got a job at Google. It's that easy. Is it really true? Like, do certs actually help you get anywhere at Google?
I think there's some certificates that Google gives you that okay. I think Google knows how to make good certificates, good programs. Check out the professional data engineer. I think it's one of their certification, but it's very difficult. And the training courses are the docs, if I'm not mistaken, last I checked. I think if you wanted to be a data engineer on Google, I think you need the certificate. I think most places that are partners of Google ask for the certificate, and that's a requisite. But I wouldn't ask you for your CKA to come work in our team. Most people don't have the certified Kubernetes admin. I think that's what it stands for when they land these jobs. But some pathways do require those certs, and Google seems to be like the most stringent one on their requisite.
That's something, yeah, I had no idea about, but that's a good answer. We have one more, I think, and then I think we might wrap up soon. But Shruti asks, did you have any concerns of missing out? Like for example, lack of data structures and algorithms knowledge, not having enough background knowledge compared to computer science engineering people, etc. Both when preparing for your first job and during your work? And how did you study getting the core knowledge within a short amount of time, overcoming feelings of rush or panicness? Example, within 2 weeks to prep for your first job, learning info as soon as possible and applying the concept to show progress in the project. Yeah.
Okay, so there's 2 questions there.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll go back and say it, and I think it's a relatively like new idea that I think people are afraid to express because it sort of like messes with the status quo. But DSA, data structures and algorithms, are there really as a filter for the people who want the job the most. It isn't a prerequisite for you to do your job exceedingly well. What happens is knowledge of DSA differentiates, for me, a senior engineer from a staff or principal. So senior engineer, you can 100% get there by just doing hours and having a lot of experience. Getting to staff or principal is something else. You've figured out a novel way of solving a problem that is sufficiently new to the company where you're immediately like propped up and like sort of like recognized by the entire company. So I never needed DSA. Complicated data structures. And I hate to say this because I feel like one of you is gonna message me up on LinkedIn like 3 years from now and be like, you told me to only use this. And the answer was actually this. Let me tell you that I've gotten away using hash maps. And this is something that most people will tell you. If you default to a hash map for most things that a hash map makes sense, it actually solves the majority of our problems. If you know anything about the time it takes to hash a number and how fast it takes to look it up on a table, that's it. All the answers are there. And so you don't really need that many things to build great software. Once you find that you're sticking a square peg in a round hole, that's the time when you need to stop and think, am I using the actual correct data structure for this? Don't make a graph problem an array of arrays problem where you have to implement it yourself when you can actually just use graphs. I've seen that before. And it's sort of a funny thing because maybe deep down they're the same data structure, but find out that time when something's just not fitting right, where the API is not, you're trying to find usage out of an API that is just not there. Maybe you're barking up the wrong tree. Maybe it's time to invent your own data structure, which is completely acceptable, or find something out in open source. And in my field of work in infrastructure, that's rarely a thing. Sometimes you do it depending on your field. In SWEs are going to do it a lot more often, mainly recursion, graphs, sure. I hope that answers the first question. The second question is, how did I deal with short timelines and not having the sense of despair drown me? I think you have to love what you do. And if it means loving to learn and loving to fail, then you have to really love those things, because it's not easy at first. There's a lot of moving pieces. There's junior engineers and senior engineers that know more than you, and a lot of people go through imposter syndrome, but don't listen to that. Follow the happy path, which is write good software, and don't be afraid to ask for feedback, and don't be an asshole, because nobody wants to work with an asshole. I think that's the most important thing that like gets you exiting a job as soon as possible. But really, I mean, the way I did it was to just put in a lot of time into it. If you listen to the 10,000 hour rule, it's very true. That's about how how long it takes to really become a master. I don't think I'm at the 10,000 hours. I'm getting close. That's going to be within the next 3 or 4 years, I think. But spend some time with it. And if you're unsure about it, spend more time on it, because all these problems are tractable. All of the technical difficulties, all of the philosophical difficulties where companies are not aligning, all of the people problems that you're going to face for the rest of your career, because trust me, there's a lot of them. Enjoy them and try to like see, okay, well, what can I gain out of these things? Because at the end of the day, they're all really positive, and everybody wants everybody else to succeed, even though it doesn't seem like that at first. So honestly, just stick to it and like give it your hardest, because a fulfilling career is one of the most fulfilling things in most people's lives. I don't know that's the case for mine.
I think it also depends on how you tackle a problem at your pace, because you're like you, Andres, your pace is completely different from someone else's, right? Like we all have different paces, like, you know, of learning and retaining information.
Oh, absolutely. I think I'm a slow learner in a lot of cases. Takes time for me to digest a problem, sometimes like a week or two. So give yourself time. You know, you know best what your limits are, but it's really a marathon. It's really not a sprint. So just take your time and pace yourself as much as possible, whether it's lead code or whether it's your first internship, whatever you do, just take your time and ask for feedback constantly. We like people who are communicative, even if they're making mistakes. We want them to tell us about their mistakes ahead of time so we can course correct and try to help them. So, and network, that's the one last thing that I don't think I reiterated enough. Try to network as much as possible. That's something that I did early in my career. I went on meetup.com, I set up a profile, and I went to as many things as possible. And a lot of them sucked. Like a lot of them were really bad, but some of them were really good. And I made connections from there. Tried to present. I did presentations at PyCon after my second year of work. Try to do that.
Do you recommend people joining clubs like CS Hub for meetups?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Like, I think we all should, you know, meet up and network together, because we have a lot of amazing people in our club too that can also help you guys achieve that and give you referrals too and make friends. Like Jordan here, I didn't know Jordan was an ex-Amazon before I met him. I mean, I did know he didn't get Amazon before that, but I didn't know Jason was Amazon, like worked at Amazon, you know, but I knew it by networking and being an exec at CS Hub first before president. So like you're right about, you know, networking, because also how like even like for conferences too, like I heard about the AWS thing through someone who I met on LinkedIn. They shared me and they told me to join, and I'm like, oh hell yeah, I'm gonna see what it's about. And I'm also met a lot of people from that tech conference, and then, you know, I'm starting to be in touch with them and expand. I also
I think your chances of getting hired, if you know the engineering manager or if you've worked with people in the company, are like easily 5x. So it's worth doing. Like it's a better use of your time to network and get to know people than to slave away at doing lead codes.
I like that advice, and it sounds more fun. I think okay, we'll do this as the cutoff. Last question. Jason asked, what's in your opinion of good engineers following problems, following that line? What's like the difference between like a good junior software engineer, mid-level, senior engineer, above? What things do you believe a person must show between those sort of levels, which I guess varies company to company, but in your sort of opinion?
Yeah, so unfortunately my opinion has been carefully crafted by the grading rubric that I've had to use when interviewing any candidate. And so
Makes sense.
I've seen grading rubrics at Google, I've seen grading rubrics at Twitter, at Reddit. I've seen even some from Meta, and they're all sort of the same, and it's all about scope. So I guess junior, I think junior engineers are concerned about what's happening between the lines of their code mainly. And as you go up into intermediate, senior, staff, principal, etc., you're starting to think laterally about, it's really not about the code itself and how performant it is, and like, do the unit tests pass? Those things are all important, but like, you're keeping into first of mind other things. So as you progress through junior into intermediate and senior, you're starting to think about more of the data, about like the data locality. Where is it being processed? Is it, you can run a JavaScript application in the back end of a single server, or you can run it at the cache of, Amazon's serverless cache, for example. So like, okay, now you're talking about distribution of data. Once you start getting into higher levels of staff and principal, you're sort of thinking it's sort of about the software, but you sort of plateau at the level of software, about the amount of input you can have on building great software products, but it's really becomes about influence. So that comes later into your career. And I would say at this job market, probably 10 years down the line, this is going to be important for you guys. Some of you will be principal, some of you will be staff, some of you will be senior. And it's about how much influence you have within the company itself, how well you can create rapport with other teams. And this is by far the most deciding factor in what makes an excellent candidate, is how you're able to drive change in the organization. If you're able to remedy a problem with another team, if you're able to distribute tasks and create something that obviously 10 people could do as opposed to you yourself, that's when those differences come to mind. For the junior, intermediate, and senior, it's unfortunately, it's all about the domain knowledge of the specific program of the specific, routine that you're building, the software that you're building. But as you grow past that, it tends to be influence and driving change within the product. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Yeah, Jason liked that answer. And I think that was a fantastic response. It's like very detailed of sort of some people might not think about laterally.
Oh,
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, yeah, sure.
I think there's a delay, but I wanted to ask Andres, this is something very off topic because I know a lot of people are tired of listening to just questions about jobs, but I'm just curious, are you an Android or an iPhone user? I'm just curious. Like, I always wanted to ask someone at Google this, like, even like, every Google people I meet, I ask them, do you use an Android and iPhone? Like, what do you actually use? And is it forced by Google to Android?
No, not at all. I used Android up until 2017. I wanted to jailbreak. I wanted to install my own operating system. I did all of that. I wanted to own the MP3 files that I played back onto my headphones. And for whatever reason, I found that the UI experience on Apple products was far superior. I found that I could copy paste between my MacBook and my phone. I found like just the ecosystem. I have an Apple TV. I have a lot of Apple products in the house, and it just all works flawlessly together. I didn't have that experience with Android, so I'm on Team Apple as of a couple of years ago.
Wow. I mean, it's shocking because most Google people would rep Android, even though I can see in their faces that they don't like using Android, because I don't know, Android ecosystem needs a lot of work, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's funny.
So you did mention you're a Mac, but do you ever use Linux or Bash terminals? Like, obviously you do use Bash, but do you ever tinker with Linux kernels at Google, or do you just strictly code on a Mac?
Yes, so it all depends on the client. A lot of the clients ask us to use like production laptops. I would, if you want to see something crazy wild, look up the Librem laptops. Essentially, everything is a virtual machine because it's very security focused. So, and that's entirely Debian, Ubuntu. So yeah, I have no choice. I think most systems at Meta are still CentOS. You're using Ubuntu or Container OS, and so you're always using them regardless of whether you want to or not. But my mainly driver is my MacBook here. It runs Bash. It runs some version of Linux.
Simplicity, I guess.
Sort of.
Is, what you want. Yeah, I guess that's all the questions we have right now, but thank you so much for this. Yeah, I guess we're gonna wrap up.
Before we leave, do you mind if people can have consent for connecting with you on LinkedIn for advice? You do not mind that?
I would prefer.
Anything?
I would prefer if they did it over Discord. It might just make more sense. I don't know if everybody has access to Discord. If they don't, they can feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. It's just a lot easier to just have everything on one single platform and access all the messages in one view.
Oh yeah. We can share that. We can share the Discord here, and then we'll also share after the meeting. Like we have a Discord server in our announcements that everybody should be able to access. Yeah. There you go. Yeah. Anything else
you want to see that you are the first person who are on Discord, but everyone tells them, "Oh, use LinkedIn to reach out to me."
Yeah. Anything else you want to shout out or anything before we end this call? Anything else you want to say?
No, I think I've said most of the things. If you guys have any questions, yeah, feel free to reach out to me. Sometimes with work, it takes time for me to get back, but Discord is always pinned on my programs, so I'll see the message.
Nice.
Eventually, I'll get to it. So, well, it's been a pleasure with all of you. It's great to give back to the community.
It's been lovely talking to you too.
Yeah, of course.
It's been really fun. Yeah. Thanks again. Yes, we love you, Andres. Thank you for doing this, and I hope you can continue mentoring a lot of people and spreading a lot of your knowledge that you've built up. Yeah, I really like the stuff you're trying to do. Just giving back to the community where you come from, all that. Thank you so much.
Of course. Well, thank you guys. Have a good evening.
Yeah, you too. Have a good evening. Bye.
Bye.